As my son Kevin's cries echoed through the room, I caught the sneering words of my brother Austin's wife, Victoria. "You know, you're the same age as my mom. It would be better if at least you looked normal." Poor Kevin, having such an ugly and pitiful mom. Victoria, who looked down on me, was trying to make my parents' home her own. I won't let that happen. My name is Allison. I miraculously got pregnant and gave birth at 45, becoming a single mother. Because it was a late pregnancy and I was unmarried, my family and I decided that I would raise my child at my parents' home. Kevin's dad disappeared without knowing about my pregnancy, and that event left me deeply wounded both mentally and physically, causing me to quit my job. Now, I live happily with my mom, who still works part-time even in her 70s, and my energetic 1-year-old son Kevin. By the way, my dad passed away 5 years ago. I have a younger brother named Austin, who is 12 years younger than me. Although he's an adult now, he's still my adorable little brother, working for an airline and living on his own. Sometimes I wish he would bring home a girlfriend. One day, while I was talking with Mom about this, Austin came home with surprising news. "I'm getting married." "What?" We were astonished by Austin's sudden announcement. "When did this happen?" It's a long story. Austin began to tell us the details. His girlfriend, Victoria, was a 20-year-old woman. They met at a party and hit it off immediately. She approached him, and a month later, they started dating, meeting up for dates between his work shifts. Victoria had been a model featured in magazines since her school days, and after graduating high school, she worked in retail. "So, how long have you been dating?" "Almost 6 months." "Only 6 months?" Austin, being serious and sensible. Deciding to marry someone with such an age difference in just half a year seemed unbelievable to me, and I couldn't help but raise my voice. "I wasn't planning to get married so soon. I am serious about Victoria, but she's still young, and we haven't known each other that long. I thought we'd be dating for at least another year, but then Victoria sent me this." "What is it?" "Wait a second. Allison, your phone screen is bigger and clearer, so I'll send it to you." Austin sent an ultrasound image labeled "Here's the baby." "How could you do this before getting married?" Mom's anger made Austin lower his eyes. It was only right for Austin to take responsibility and marry Victoria. But I couldn't help but ask quietly. "You didn't get her pregnant on purpose, right?" "Of course not. But, as a guy, I guess it's my fault. I feel really bad for her." I gently patted Austin's shoulder as he gave a weak smile. Within a month, Austin got married. Victoria, who was young, cute, hardworking, and skillfully affectionate, brought immense joy to Mom, as if she had gained another grandchild. They planned to have the wedding before Victoria's belly showed, choosing a venue close to our home, and frequently visited us for wedding preparations. To Mom, Austin seemed special, and she looked incredibly happy whenever Austin and Victoria visited. "Your cooking is so delicious, I could eat it every day." Since hearing that, I started eagerly cooking whenever I knew Austin and Victoria were coming over. Austin and Victoria seem happy, and Mom dotes on them. I should be happy to have new family members too, but honestly, I can't feel that joy. Because it seems like she looks down on me. When Austin or Mom is around, she talks normally, but when it's just the two of us, she barely speaks and treats me with contempt. I genuinely want to get along with her. I don't remember doing anything to deserve being looked down on, but if I had to guess, it's probably because of my appearance. I sighed at my asymmetric, distorted face in the mirror and turned it face down on the table. Even with makeup, my face isn't exactly beautiful. It's not a pleasant feeling, but such childish thoughts aren't unheard of for a woman in her 20s, and I kept telling myself that as long as Austin is happy, it's fine. Then one day, as Austin and Victoria's wedding approached, they came over as usual. "We're home." "Welcome back, Austin." "And Victoria, too." "Hello. Here, I brought you this." "Oh, it's a cake from that famous shop." "I'm so happy. Let's have it together later." "Come on in." "Yes." I could hear Victoria's excited voice and light footsteps approaching from the entrance. As I was about to leave the room and go to the room next to the living room where Kevin was sleeping, the door opened, and I made eye contact with Victoria. "Welcome." She completely ignored me. As if she didn't hear me, Victoria quickly walked past me and sat on the sofa. This is how she acts when Austin and Mom aren't looking. I knew it, but it still hurt. Rubbing my strained smile, I entered the room and closed the door. Next door, I could hear Austin, Victoria, and Mom chatting happily. "Victoria is here, so you should join us." Hearing Mom's voice through the door, I put my hand on the door but immediately lowered it and said, "Sorry. If I go now, Kevin will get upset, so I can't." "Really? I'll always be here to take over if you need." "Thank you." Lying down next to the quietly sleeping Kevin, I sighed softly. "I'm sorry for lying, Mom. But I don't want to force myself to smile more than necessary." She only knows Victoria's friendly side. She knows we don't get along, but that's it. Austin doesn't know either. Even so, I act normal when the three of us are together, and Victoria doesn't mistreat Kevin. They are happy, so I tried to ignore the pain stabbing my heart. I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to Kevin's crying. I heard the front door open in the distance. Thinking they had finally left, I slowly got up and went to make Kevin's milk, only to be surprised. "Good morning, Allison." There was Victoria, sitting with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Where's Austin?" "Austin was called by an old friend and went to see them after a long time." So, the door I heard earlier was his. I left Kevin, who was crying, with Mom and went to the kitchen to prepare some milk. While I was doing that, Mom, soothing Kevin, said to Victoria, "It might be an all-night thing, so why don't you stay over?" "What? Really?" Mom's unexpected suggestion almost made me drop the baby bottle. "Stay over?" "Mom, she doesn't have any change of clothes or anything. It's too sudden, it would be inconvenient." "It's fine. You can buy some underwear at the nearby supermarket, and it's just for the night, so she can borrow something to sleep in. I'll wash what she's wearing now so she can wear it again tomorrow." "Thank you. I'll take you up on that offer." "Thank you, Allison." I was stunned by the tone of her voice, which sounded almost like she was adding a heart at the end. What was that cold attitude from earlier about? It felt like she was a completely different person. Honestly, it felt uncomfortable having someone in the house who had ill will towards me, but as long as we didn't end up alone together, I could manage. I made up my mind to endure it. As dinner began in a calm atmosphere, Mom was considerate towards Victoria. "Your belly isn't showing yet, Victoria. Maybe because you're slim, the baby might be small too?" "Maybe. If you're not having morning sickness, you need to eat well. Make sure to get enough nutrients before you go home." Victoria happily accepted Mom's hospitality while I felt like I was invisible. There were no particular problems, and soon it was time to get ready for bed. Austin still wasn't home. I sighed as I looked at the pink high heels by the front door. Normally, Austin's sneakers would be next to them, or neither would be there at all. After that, Victoria had gone shopping at the supermarket's clothing section and was now taking a bath. Mom had asked me to prepare the guest room upstairs. It used to be Austin's room, but it had turned into a storage room, so it needed some cleaning and the bed had to be made. I turned on the air conditioner and quickly tidied up, then made the bed. Why do I have to do this? Swallowing my frustration, I turned to head back to the living room. Huh? I let out a strange noise. Victoria was standing in the doorway, glaring at me. My heart pounded in surprise as I addressed her. What's wrong? Nothing. I heard you were made to prepare the bedroom, so I came to say I could do it myself. She is nice to Mom, right? I see. It's okay, I'm done already. As I tried to leave the room, Victoria stood blocking the door. I had no idea what she wanted, and as I grew confused, she glared at me and then sneered. Allison, you can be summed up in 3 words. What? Fat, ugly, and lame. That's the 3 words. I was speechless at her sudden insult. I never expected to be directly called childish names. It's true I've gained 22 pounds, my face isn't symmetrical compared to most women, and I stay in pajamas all day because I don't go out. I have something to talk about, so could you come in for a moment? Ignoring my confusion, Victoria pushed me into the room. She locked the door and turned to face me, leaning against it. I always dreamed of getting married. What? I hate studying, and I don't want to work. So I wanted to catch a man with a decent amount of money to have a stable life and become a relaxed and free housewife. Suddenly, Victoria started talking about herself, leaving me stunned and unsure of what to make of it all. Ignoring my reaction, Victoria continued her monologue. Austin may be a bit older, but he's a pilot for a major airline, looks decent, and has a good personality. Plus, his parents' house is in a prime downtown location, which is just perfect. Wait, what does that mean? But Austin's mom is a given, and the real problem is you. It's impossible for me to become family with someone so ugly. How about getting some plastic surgery? Everyone's doing it these days. What? And how about going on a diet? You're getting ugly because you're still living at your parents' house. Aren't you embarrassed? Her well-formed lips spat out these belittling words, causing anger to bubble up inside me. What? Are you marrying him just for our money? I raised my voice in frustration, but she just laughed. Why are you getting so worked up? It's hilarious. I'm just seeking stability in exchange for letting him marry a young and beautiful woman like me. This woman is dangerous. If things continue like this, she'll take over the house, and Austin's money will be squandered. Alarm bells rang in my head. Thanks for letting me know. I'll tell Austin about your true nature. Break up with him. He wouldn't believe you without any proof. The wedding is soon. It's too late to do anything about it, and I won't let you. If only my eyes or ears had a recording function. Victoria continued, with a malicious smile. Okay, let me get straight to the point. After we settle down with kids, we plan to move into this house, so could you please move out? What? You can't just decide that on your own. It's not on my own. I've already discussed it with Austin and his mom. They both agreed it's fine, so all you need to do is give the okay. This is my house. It's just your parents' house, right? Eventually, it will be Austin's anyway, so it's just a matter of time. Go ahead and clear out your room. Consider it a compromise in place of a wedding gift. I was speechless at her selfish and one-sided words. Victoria continued with a nasty grin. Besides, I think it's about time you became independent. Austin is a pilot, and you're still leeching off your parents' house. Isn't that embarrassing? Leeching. I'm actually. A proper person wouldn't stay home all day? Point made. Her condescending attitude irritated me. "You don't know anything about me, so stop talking like you do." "Well, I don't want to know, and I'm not interested." "You're a single mother because you were dumped for being ugly, right?" "I don't even need to ask to know that much." It's so sad. I could feel the heat of anger rising to my face. Just as I was about to yell at her, I heard Kevin crying from downstairs, which brought me back to reality. Victoria opened the door. "Kevin is crying. Aren't you going to check on him?" she said, nodding towards the door, and went downstairs by herself. I didn't want to go back to the room with this woman. Hesitating at the top of the stairs as Kevin's cries echoed, Victoria's mocking words reached my ears. "By the way, you're the same age as my mom, right?" I looked at her, and she was hiding her smirk behind her hand while looking up at me. "If at least you looked good." Poor Kevin, having an ugly and shabby mother. That one remark pushed me to my limit. I instinctively chased after her, raising my hand, just as the door to the living room opened and Mom appeared, holding Kevin. "What are you doing?" "Mom. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I misspoke. I said that Allison and my mom are the same age." Victoria raised her voice, trying to cover mine. Then she quickly turned to me and lowered her head. "I'm sorry for making you uncomfortable." "What?" As I stood there in shock at her sudden change in attitude, Mom gently patted Victoria's shoulder and said, "Keep such thoughts to yourself. It's fine because we're family, but if you say it to others, it could cause irreparable harm." "Yes, I'll be careful." "Allison, Victoria is apologizing, so you should forgive her. Raising your hand is out of the question." "Wait, Mom." "This ends the discussion. Now, go hold Kevin." Mom handed the crying Kevin to me and then gently led Victoria back to the living room. I stood in the dim hallway, holding the sobbing Kevin, feeling helpless. While putting Kevin to sleep in the room, I noticed Austin had come home. Hearing the three of them happily chatting, tears welled up in my eyes. Even though I'm being ridiculed, my family is being ridiculed, and Kevin is being ridiculed, I can easily imagine that my words would be dismissed as paranoid by that two-faced person. Until now, it was just a facade, but to say such things to my face. She's really trying to take over this house. Knowing Victoria. She won't take care of Mom, and one day she might even abandon Austin. The thought of our family falling apart scared me. I won't let that happen. I'm not the kind of person who would back down. If she thinks everything will go her way, she's terribly mistaken. With renewed determination, I gripped my phone, ready to protect my family. And on a certain day, I found myself at a wedding venue with Mom. After that incident, Victoria kept insisting that I shouldn't attend the wedding and should claim to be sick, but when I told her that a former nurse like Mom wouldn't believe it, she looked frustrated. "Fine, you can come, but don't blame me if you embarrass yourself," and said. I didn't understand what she meant, but it's clear that Victoria holds ill will only towards me. The wedding was hastily arranged, so the guests were just relatives and family. She's probably planning to win everyone over today, except for me. The wedding proceeded smoothly, and finally, it was time for the letter to the family. With tears in her eyes, Victoria began to read the letter. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending our wedding today despite your busy schedules." Even those tears seemed fake to me. It's a joyous wedding. For Austin's sake, I decided to endure and focused on taking care of Kevin. "Thank you for accepting our marriage. Allison seems to be enjoying her moratorium, but from now on, I will repay your kindness as your daughter." So this is what she meant by embarrassing. Sure, it might be shameful for an outsider to see someone my age not working. Of course, that's if it were true. When Victoria finished reading her letter, there was a noticeable stir among our guests instead of the expected emotional response. Austin was also surprised.
What? What's going on?
Austin asked frantically, seeing Victoria's puzzled smile. Victoria, aren't you mistaken? Allison worked as a flight attendant in the same company as me until just 2 years ago.
What?
Not only did she not have a moratorium period, but she was already working and even paying for my tuition when I was just a kid.
No way! But with that appearance.
Victoria pointed at me, visibly shaking. I shrugged my shoulders. Listen, Allison had an accident and got injured. She couldn't interact with customers as a crew member with that face, so she had no choice but to quit being a flight attendant.
No! I didn't know that.
Didn't know? When I tried to talk about Allison, you said you heard it directly from her the last time we met, and that was enough. It's no wonder Victoria didn't know. She never even tried to listen to me. Everything Austin is saying is true. 2 years ago, my boyfriend and I were involved in a car accident. He passed away, and although I survived, I suffered severe facial injuries that couldn't be fully corrected with plastic surgery. At the same time, I found out I was pregnant with his child. That's Kevin.
But she's unemployed now.
What are you talking about? Allison has hardly ever been unemployed.
What?
After quitting as a flight attendant, she's been working from home as a translator to support Kevin and Mom. What did you even hear from Allison, Victoria? Austin firmly told Victoria, who was trying to justify herself. As Victoria was at a loss for words, the host took the microphone and smiled. What a wonderful family. Their presence will surely support the couple's future. Now, let's proceed with the reading of the letters. With the host's half-forced words, the reception continued somehow. Victoria looked dissatisfied and didn't even manage a polite smile while seeing off the guests. On the way back home after the wedding, Mom couldn't hide her confusion about Victoria's true nature and seemed somewhat depressed. Shortly after arriving home, Austin called. Victoria wants to have an important talk. But I think you're tired, so we don't have to force it. I have something to talk to her about too. Austin's tone was low. He, like Mom, had glimpsed Victoria's true nature. If she wants to come, let her. I have something to talk about too. I took Austin and Victoria's proposal instead of Mom, who didn't have the energy to answer the phone. It worked out well. A while later, when Austin and Victoria arrived, Victoria grabbed my arm as soon as we were alone and dragged me to a secluded spot. How dare you humiliate me, you ugly cow! I tried to talk to you many times, but you didn't listen. Then, Victoria grabbed my collar and yelled,
Shut up! You ruined my perfect wedding, and I won't forgive you.
You're the one who caused the mess, to begin with. Frankly, no decent adult would intentionally embarrass a family member at such a joyous event. Her behavior was so childish that I couldn't help but be amazed. I sighed involuntarily, and she angrily pushed me away. Once I get this house, you'll be the first to go. You will going to be a servant. After mocking me, Victoria returned to the living room. I coughed a few times, rubbed my back where I had hit the wall, and checked my mobile phone in my pocket. Because of the trouble at the reception, the atmosphere was somewhat awkward, and our discussion started with just the four of us. When she began to drink, Victoria spoke up. Allison, I'm sorry for what happened at the reception. I've been so busy with wedding preparations that I didn't realize how weird my words sounded. But I truly want to repay you. So, what's this talk about? When I asked, Victoria hesitated for a moment and then forced a cheerful smile.
You said you wanted to return the favor. Now that the wedding is over, why don't we think about living together? Well, Allison,
That's not an issue. She told me to take care of Mom in her place. Right, Allison? Victoria spoke in a domineering tone, cutting off Mom's voice. Of course, Mom hadn't said a word about that. I sighed and quickly took out my mobile phone. Putting it on speaker, I played a certain recording at full volume.
How dare you humiliate me, you ugly cow?
Victoria's angry shout echoed through the room, silencing everyone. The recording revealed Victoria's true nature, leaving Austin pale with shock.
When did you?
I had prepared the mobile phone recorder just in case, to capture any evidence.
What is the meaning of this? Well, this is...
Victoria, panicking under Austin's glare, darted her eyes around the room. I smiled and said, "Let me tell you something. There's no way this house will ever be yours."
Why? Austin is the heir.
Because the house is in my name.
What?
Mom is getting older, and since I don't have any plans to get married, she transferred it to me as a gift.
Then what about the inheritance?
That's none of your business. We've got that covered. But seriously, as soon as you find out the house is mine, you start talking about inheritance? Mom is still healthy, you know. Her true colors started to show. Under Austin's cold stare, she tried to compose herself by rubbing her belly.
What? You're going to believe Allison over me? I'm pregnant. You should be mad at Allison for stressing me out.
Enough. Aren't you ashamed of lying just to save yourself?
Shut up. Austin has a duty to make me happy. He always has to put me first.
Austin, at a loss for words, hung his head. Victoria was clearly trying to manipulate him into feeling guilty and complying with her demands. The last bit of restraint I had left snapped.
If that's how you want to play it, I won't hold back.
I pulled out a clear file from my favorite bag and slapped 2 images down.
What is this?
Austin and Mom were speechless. Victoria turned pale. No morning sickness, your belly isn't showing, and you're still wearing high heels. I found it suspicious. I checked the ultrasound images Austin gave me and confirmed it. The images were enlarged copies of 2 identical ultrasound photos, except one had a message written over the date. The exact same ultrasound image you sent to Austin was on a website. The one I found was dated 5 years ago. I continued, pressing the shaken Victoria.
You're not pregnant, are you?
Victoria was stunned, clearly shaken. You thought it through. People wouldn't notice the details just because it's an ultrasound photo. You even covered the date with a message. Finding that exact image online was a gamble. With the help of friends I made during my flight attendant days, I managed to locate it. If you still want to make excuses, go get tested at the hospital with Austin. With a twisted expression, biting her lip and glaring at me, Victoria spat out.
I'm leaving. Goodbye. Forever, goodbye.
She stormed past me, marching straight to the door. Austin sighed deeply, bowed his head, and dashed out after her. At that moment, Kevin, who had been sleeping quietly in the room, began to cry. I picked him up and gently kissed his cheek. Mom slowly stood up, looked at me, and smiled.
Shall I make some milk?
I nodded and followed Mom to the kitchen, still holding Kevin. The usual calm atmosphere returned, as if the earlier chaos had never happened. Not even a month after the wedding, Austin and Victoria divorced. According to Austin, they had gone to the hospital with a sliver of hope, only to be told that despite it being her first visit, Victoria's pregnancy test was positive. Moreover, it was confirmed she was in the early stages of pregnancy. Since hearing about the pregnancy, Austin had refrained from any intimate relations out of concern for Victoria's health. So, what did this mean? Apparently, Victoria had been having an affair behind Austin's back and was carrying the child of her lover. Austin hired a detective, quickly gathering evidence of Victoria's infidelity, and demanded compensation in the divorce court. To make matters worse, Victoria's lover was someone who worked at a club, and he abandoned her as soon as the compensation claim was made. Victoria tearfully begged Austin to take her back, but Austin, fed up with her lies, flatly refused. At just 20 years old, Victoria couldn't possibly pay the hefty compensation, so she turned to her parents, who covered the costs. She was scolded severely and brought back home. Ironically, she became the single mother living with her parents she had once scorned. Young and now the subject of scrutiny, she would have to work and raise her child. Well, it was her own doing. I just hope that the innocent child can be raised well by the in-laws. 2 years later, Austin reconnected with an old friend at a reunion and decided to remarry. Given what happened with Victoria, both Mom and I were initially cautious, but the new woman was kind-hearted and genuine, and she adored Kevin. Kevin was to be the ring bearer at their wedding. Dressed in a bow tie and carrying a beautiful small box, Kevin walked down the aisle, drawing cheers from the guests. Handing the rings to Austin, he then ran back to me with a proud smile, and I picked him up gently. His eyes were just like those of the man I loved. Mom stood smiling beside me. In front of us were the happy Austin and his bride. I have no plans to remarry. But that's all right. I have my family. I will continue to do my best to ensure my loved ones always have smiles on their faces.
Don't you dare show up at my college entrance ceremony next month, you fake mom.
Alan, my husband Scott's son from a previous marriage, told me bluntly, not even trying to hide his displeased expression. As he shamelessly devoured the celebratory meal I had prepared for his acceptance, Alan clicked his tongue at me, unable to conceal his shock at my appearance.
Why are you so surprised? You even showed up uninvited to my high school graduation. People thought a woman with your saggy body was my mom, and it was humiliating for me.
Alan spat out venomously, recalling the recent high school graduation ceremony. It was true that I wasn't Alan's real mother, and my husband Scott and I are 8 years apart. But that's precisely why I had tried to be considerate. Sure, I had been exhausted and maybe my dark circles were showing, but I had even gone to the beauty salon to get dolled up. I couldn't have looked bad enough to warrant such hurtful comments. Even if Alan wasn't my biological son, it was my only son's graduation. I had rearranged meetings and business deals, somehow managing to take the day off to attend, and yet this was how he felt about me. It made my heart sink. Moreover, Scott, who should have defended me, instead crudely laughed at the sight of Alan attacking me.
Well, I guess there's only so much a makeup can do. She's an old woman after all. Seriously, for someone working at a trading company, having her around must really bring down the efficiency of the people around her.
Scott and Alan gradually got more and more animated, talking about how ugly and old I had become. Aging is a natural process that everyone goes through, yet they mocked it as something hideous and looked down on me. Ah, this marriage was indeed a mistake, I realized once again with a pang. I've always had terrible luck with marriages. My first husband had easily cheated on me, and after the divorce, I had remained single for a long time. As I approached my mid-50s, feeling a sudden longing for companionship, I had been enjoying a drink at a bar after work when Scott happened to sit down next to me. Apparently, Scott too had been cheated on and had just gotten divorced. Perhaps because we had that in common, Scott and I started frequently meeting up at that bar. Before I knew it, I was being introduced to Scott's son Alan. A high school student aiming for medical school, Alan seemed to take after Scott in his politeness and diligence. I decided they were the family I wanted to become a part of. I had thought that after making the big decision to remarry, a warm family life would be waiting for me. But gradually, they started draining my salary while treating me like a housekeeper. It was only then that I realized I had been thoroughly ensnared in their intricately woven spider web of a trap. Like a trapped butterfly, perhaps struggling was futile. But was this really okay? Was I really content to let these men, who didn't even see me as human, say whatever they wanted about me?
That's going too far, even for you, I retorted, unable to contain my anger for once. Shut up. Are you gonna lecture me again? I told you to stop acting like you're my mom.
Alan raised his voice even louder at my rare display of backbone. As Alan saw the tears welling up in my eyes, he clicked his tongue in annoyance.
Seriously, why did you even marry a woman like this, Dad?
Put on the spot by Alan's pointed gaze, Scott's shoulders jumped in surprise before he hurriedly tried to appease his son.
Sorry about that, Alan. Come on, Carol, you apologize too.
With those words, Scott tried to push my head down in a forced bow. This was ridiculous. Why should I have to apologize?
Fine, I get it.
Saying that, I stood up from my seat. Then, on the day of the university entrance ceremony we had been waiting for, they were confronted with a shocking revelation from the school administration. Due to the $12,000 in unpaid tuition fees, your acceptance has been revoked.
What?
My name is Carol, a 55-year-old woman working at a trading company. I'm fortunate to hold the position of Director of Corporate Planning, allowing me to live comfortably without financial worries. I was married once in my 30s, but that ended in divorce due to my ex-husband's infidelity. For a while after that, I threw myself into my work. But about a year ago, I happened to meet Scott at a bar I had stopped by on a whim. He had taken the seat next to me at the counter by chance, and as we got to talking, we discovered that we had both been cheated on and divorced, finding a sense of camaraderie in our shared experiences. Before long, we started seeing each other outside of the bar as well. Scott was 47 and, to my surprise, worked at one of my company's client firms as a sales manager. He had a son, Alan, who was in his third year of high school. Almost without realizing it, the three of us started having meals together frequently. Alan was aiming to become a doctor and was constantly studying for the brutally competitive entrance exams. Yet, he never seemed bothered about taking time away from his studies to have dinner with us. On the contrary, he was a polite and upstanding young man. I suppose he took after his father Scott's courteous and hardworking side. It was only natural that the fondness I felt for them steadily grew stronger and stronger. After meeting up as a trio so many times, I found myself wanting to support Scott and Alan however I could. So, when Scott proposed, I gladly accepted. Remarrying in my 50s, I was too embarrassed to wear a wedding dress, so we didn't have a ceremony. But with Scott being a sales manager at one of our client companies, both of our firms celebrated with a grand reception party. I likely wouldn't be having any children with Scott, but I had Alan who looked up to me as well. I thought I could finally build a warm, loving family. Carol, hand over your wallet. Wow, you've got quite a bit in here. Saying that, Scott snatched my wallet as I came home from work, pulled out all the cash I had inside, and stuffed it into his own wallet. I silently picked up my discarded wallet, brushed off the dust, and put it back in my purse. I didn't even have the energy to protest or demand he return the money anymore. I seem to have a truly unfortunate fate when it comes to marriage. From the moment we registered our marriage, they changed completely. As soon as Scott realized that my salary was higher than his, he started pouring all of his earnings into gambling and alcohol. I knew he liked to drink since we met at a bar, but he had told me he didn't gamble. I had believed his words, but that was a lie. Scott's way of playing was so skilled that calling it a first-time gambling addiction would be an understatement. He was far too accustomed to it. And soon after Scott started living it up, the once kind Alan underwent a drastic change as well.
Don't just stand there spacing out. You're in the way, move.
Returning from cram school, Alan roughly shoved past me as I stood frozen in the hallway near the entrance.
Eek! Don't make such a girly scream, it's gross.
As I let out a shriek from hitting the wall, Alan clicked his tongue in irritation and spat those words at me. But this much was still tolerable. Whenever he was unhappy with his test results at cram school or regular school, he would hurl even worse verbal abuse at me. He was probably venting the stress from his entrance exam studies on me. I remember one time when I scolded Alan for his attitude, he gave me an incredibly cold look.
Are you misunderstanding something? We graciously decided to become family with a worn-out woman in her 50s like you. Don't act like you're my mom.
I was stunned by his words, clearly looking down on me. If I recall correctly, that was the day I had carefully considered what to buy and cook to help with his exam studies. Wiping up the eggs splattered on the floor, I cried at the thought that this was how he saw me. Scott, watching TV behind me, didn't offer to help or comfort me. These days, the word divorce keeps crossing my mind. But after the company threw us such a grand celebratory party, I can't exactly turn around and say we got divorced right away. Even if I quietly got divorced without saying anything, it would quickly spread through the internal company procedures. And while I'm not obligated to report it, I can't not pay my respects to the executives who orchestrated everything for us. I had many sleepless nights, plagued by headaches. And while I was agonizing over choosing the wrong marriage partner, unable to muster the resolve for divorce, Alan passed the entrance exam for the highly competitive medical school he had been aiming for on his first try. Thinking he would finally be free from the stress of entrance exams, I felt even more relieved than Alan himself. However, after receiving his acceptance letter, rather than going back to his old self, Alan got carried away with the success and escalated his verbal abuse towards me. Complaining was a given, and whenever I entered his line of sight, he would kick the floor or chairs and hit the walls as if to show how unpleasant it was for him. He even threw laundry at me once. Today too, as I came home utterly exhausted from work, Alan complained as if he was forcing himself to eat my cooking.
Is the food not ready yet? Hurry up and make it. I'm doing you a favor by eating it.
Even though I had already prepared the ingredients for the celebratory meal the day before, as soon as I got home, before I could even change out of my work clothes, I tiredly put on an apron and started making the side dishes. My nerves were completely frayed from the stress of repeatedly double-checking everything to make sure my poor health wouldn't affect my work performance, but none of that mattered to these two. Despite it being a celebration of Alan's acceptance, they had come home early and were relaxing in the living room as usual, not lifting a finger to help. And as if to add insult to injury, Scott laughed.
Hey, Carol, are you making Alan complain again? He's going to be a doctor in the future. Don't make him waste his precious time.
Instead of admonishing Alan, Scott berated me as if it was my fault for making Alan say such things. Ever since Alan's acceptance was confirmed, Scott had been putting me down even more than before, together with Alan, as if to appease him. One time, when I was crying alone in the living room in the middle of the night, Scott spat out these words to me. Anyone can see who's the better choice to side with, between you who will retire in less than 10 years, and my son who will be earning a high salary as a doctor for decades to come. I can never forget his face as he sneered at me, looking like a demon. At Scott's words, I shuddered, my face turning deathly pale. To them, I wasn't a life partner or anything of the sort. I was just a convenient person to bring in money and do the housework. There wasn't a shred of the warmth I once felt there. I gripped the kitchen knife tightly, biting my lip in frustration. For me, who had been working just as hard as any man at the trading company, being treated like a mere housekeeper was an even greater humiliation than when I discovered my first husband's infidelity. But divorce. As I was consumed by such circling thoughts, carrying the finished dishes to the table where Alan sat with his legs outstretched, he let out a sigh dripping with sarcasm. This is the celebration for my acceptance? What the hell? Can't you put out something more luxurious? Unbelievable. I got into medical school, you know? Right, Dad? Seriously, is this all you could prepare? Even with the roast chicken, sushi, colorful salads, and stewed dishes crowding the table, it seemed to fall far short of the luxurious meal they had in mind. I knew they would have a nasty attitude, but I also knew how much time and effort Alan had poured into his studies to overcome this difficult hurdle. That's why I had taken the time to make everything from scratch, hoping to please them even a little, but I was made painfully aware of my own foolishness. Their incessant complaining showed no signs of ending. If they were going to complain anyway, I might as well not cook at all, but if I bought something from the store, they would complain even more than when I made it myself, calling it half-assed or cheap. Ever since I was verbally abused for buying deli items when I came home late from overtime, I stopped serving store-bought food as is. I'm sorry. Could you please eat it? I said, pleading with them while holding back my frustration. If I didn't, they would never start eating. Even as they grumbled about how bad it was, I sighed in relief as the food disappeared into their mouths one after another. It seemed they were in a good mood today. I would save the extra ingredients I bought in case they demanded I remake the meal for tomorrow. That's when it happened. Stuffing his face to the point of vulgarity, Alan suddenly looked up as if remembering something. Oh, right. Just to make it clear, don't you dare show up at my college entrance ceremony next month, you fake mom. What? I reflexively lifted my head from where I had been looking down, my eyes meeting Alan's, who made no attempt to hide his displeasure. Why are you so surprised? You even showed up uninvited to my high school graduation. People thought a woman with your saggy body was my mom, and it was humiliating for me. But I was stunned by his spiteful words. Sure, I had been exhausted and maybe my dark circles were showing, but I had even gone to the beauty salon to get dolled up. I couldn't have looked bad enough to warrant such comments. Even if Alan wasn't my biological son, he was my only son now, and it was his graduation ceremony. I had rearranged meetings and business deals, somehow managing to take the day off to attend, and yet this was how he felt about me? As I sat there in shock, Scott added insult to injury. Well, I guess there's only so much a makeup can do. Haha, she's an old woman after all. Seriously, for someone working at a trading company, having her around must really bring down the efficiency of the people around her. The two of them gradually got more and more animated, talking about how ugly and old I had become. I may be pushing 60 soon, but this wasn't the kind of topic to laugh about while clapping your hands in front of a woman. Hey, that's going too far, even for you. Shut up! Are you gonna lecture me again? I told you to stop acting like you're my mom. When I angrily talked back, Alan cut me off with a shout. Acting like your mom? My words echoed in the now silent dining room. I couldn't find anything else to say. He had been such a good kid at first. He was under a lot of stress from his entrance exams now. I had become his mom, so I had to be patient. I kept telling myself that, over and over. Even if I was verbally abused by someone else's child who was already an adult, I had thought that if he accepted me as his dad's wife, I would do my best to be his mom.
Listen up, I don't think of you as my mom, not even a tiny bit. It pisses me off just having a fake like you hanging around our house.
Not even trying to hide his anger, Alan stabbed his fork into the chicken. I had been wrong in my thinking from the very start. He had never accepted me at all. Seeing the tears spilling from my eyes, Alan clicked his tongue in annoyance.
Seriously, why did you even marry a woman like this, Dad?
Put on the spot by Alan's pointed gaze, Scott's shoulders jumped in surprise before he hurriedly tried to appease his son.
Sorry about that, Alan. Come on, Carol, you apologize too.
With those words, Scott tried to push my head down in a forced bow. This was ridiculous. Why should I have to apologize?
Fine, I get it.
I brushed off Scott's hand and stood up forcefully, making a loud noise.
What's gotten into you all of a sudden?
Surprised by my action, Scott recoiled and stared at me in confusion. Alan also looked up at me with his mouth agape in shock.
I can't take it anymore. I'm sick and tired of this.
I took off the apron I was still wearing, crumpled it up, and threw it at Scott before heading to the bedroom. As I pulled out the large suitcase I had bought for long business trips, Scott and Alan hurriedly chased after me.
Hey, where do you think you're going?
I had no desire to answer their bewildered voices anymore. I wasn't living just to be at their beck and call.
I'll send you the divorce papers later.
After packing the bare essentials into my suitcase, I headed straight for the front door.
Divorce? If she says she's leaving, just let her go, Dad.
In contrast to the shocked Scott, Alan's mocking words were cut off by the door slamming behind me. I had been wrong. I should have made this decision much sooner. I must have been out of my mind to waste my time on these bastards. The day I left the house, I stayed at a hotel near my office. The next day, I immediately went around to the people and places that had helped us when we got married, explaining the reasons for the divorce and apologizing. Although they were surprised at first, they must have sensed something from my usual demeanor. At the very least, none of my colleagues at work tried to dissuade me from the divorce. About a month after submitting the divorce papers, my cell phone was buzzing with a barrage of calls from Scott. As I was working, feeling a sense of comfort in the tranquility I had finally regained and the busyness of the new fiscal year, I furrowed my brow and excused myself from my coworkers before getting up from my seat. Stepping out into the emergency stairwell of the office building, I sighed and answered the phone.
What is it?
Before I could even get the words out, Scott's furious voice blared in my ear.
Hey, what the hell is going on?
Calm down, what are you talking about? I was fed up with his shouting voice that didn't even bother to identify himself. Even if I could tell who was calling from the phone number, would it kill him to at least say his name? With that thought, I sighed and prompted him to continue. Then, an entirely unexpected response came.
Alan's acceptance to the university has been revoked.
Huh? Did he get involved in some kind of incident? After blurting that out, I suddenly had second thoughts. Why should I care about someone else's acceptance being revoked?
Well, whatever the reason, it has nothing to do with me anymore, so don't call me about it.
As I said that and moved the phone away from my ear to hang up, Scott started yelling so loudly that the screen vibrated.
Cut the crap! It's your fault for not paying the tuition.
What?
Why would I be the one to pay his tuition?
I gripped the phone tighter and retorted upon hearing his words. But Scott didn't stay silent either.
You're the one with the higher income, so of course you should be the one paying. I even gave you all the paperwork for the procedures.
What was he suddenly going on about? As I furrowed my brow, I suddenly remembered. He had indeed dumped all the bothersome paperwork on me, but on the day I left the house, I had gathered it all and left it behind. I put all the paperwork together in an easy-to-find place, didn't I?
Yeah, and I submitted it as is. After doing all that, why didn't you pay the tuition?
Scott shouted in frustration at my words, and the headache I had forgotten about came rushing back. Sighing, I looked up at the sky, wondering if happiness was really slipping away from me.
Don't try to pin this nonsense on me. Besides, didn't the university try to contact you to confirm?
When I said that out of exasperation, Scott stammered and started making excuses.
Well, it was from an unknown number, so I thought it might be a suspicious call. I can't believe this. You blocked the number without even checking who it was?
I stared at Scott in disbelief over his unbelievable statement. Come to think of it, I vaguely remembered Scott saying something like this before.
As a manager, I get so many annoying calls from who knows where. I'd block them right away, but it's a never-ending battle.
He had bragged about it proudly, but I bet he never dreamed it would come back to bite him like this. Besides, he had left checking the mail to me for the longest time, so knowing him, he probably didn't even bother to look at the reminder letters. I'm sure he didn't even notice the notification about the acceptance being revoked. But all of this was a tragedy of his own making. It was none of my concern.
This is your fault. Go apologize to the university right now and pay the tuition.
That's why I was troubled by him trying to shift the blame like this.
Don't be ridiculous. We're already divorced. Why should I have to pay for a stranger's tuition?
Ignoring Scott's loud ranting, I hung up the phone and hit the block button. God, how foolish can I be? I should have blocked his number right from the start. With a heavy sigh, I went back to work. During my lunch break that day, as I stepped out to get something to eat, Scott and Alan stood in my way.
It's because you were too stingy to pay the tuition that I.
Their matching new suits were wrinkled, and they were both panting, as if they had run here. They glared at me with hatred in their eyes. Their arguments hadn't changed one bit. In other words, they insisted that it was my fault Alan's acceptance had been revoked. So they repeated the unreasonable demand Scott had made over the phone earlier, telling me to take responsibility and somehow get Alan enrolled. They can go ahead and be angry, but they're directing their anger at the wrong person.
Look, how many times do I have to tell you? Scott and I are already divorced. I never adopted Alan, so he's a complete stranger to me.
I probably didn't even have the energy left to sigh anymore.
In the first place, why should I, a stranger, have to pay for his tuition when his actual father wouldn't?
Scott's face flushed red with anger at my logical argument, as if I were lecturing a child.
Shut up! You were the higher earner, so of course you should pay. Spouting all this bullshit, my ex-wife and now you? Women are so.
No matter how much I explained, not only did he refuse to back down unless he got the answer he wanted, but he even made misogynistic remarks. That's when I took out a certain item.
Hey, could you listen to this for a second?
In my hand was a small recorder. The truth is, over the past few months, I had been recording every single relentless verbal abuse and attempt to force me into submission through violence from Scott and Alan. When I played it back, their faces turned visibly pale.
If you don't stop this now, I'll submit this to the police.
At the word police, Scott visibly cowered, looking like he might collapse at any moment. But Alan took a deep breath and then put on that nasty, mocking sneer. "Ha, I'm an elite, you know. I'm just giving some guidance to an incompetent old hag." Alan, acting all high and mighty as if he were in the right, put his hands on his hips and puffed out his chest. "The police, huh? I'd like to see you try. Who's gonna listen to a woman like you?"
Hey, Alan! Cut it out!
Scott hurriedly tried to stop Alan, who had started provoking me, probably realizing that the odds were against them. But that seemed to have the opposite effect. Alan, who had been put on a pedestal all this time, kept repeating his disparaging comments about me and his misogynistic remarks as if he himself were the law. Shoving aside the panicking Scott, he spat in my direction. And before long, his loud voice had caught the attention of the rubberneckers around us. Along with the murmuring, I could see cameras being pointed our way. But Alan probably didn't notice this due to his anger. He kept hurling abuse at me as I took it all in with a blank expression.
"Are you all right, Carol? I'll call the police right now."
One of my colleagues who had also been about to go out for lunch seemed to have noticed that I was at the center of the commotion and hurried over to me.
"The police? Alan, we're leaving."
When he saw her take out her cell phone to dial 911, Scott let out a scream. Then he dragged Alan, who was still popping veins in his forehead, feeling like he hadn't said enough, and they fled the scene.
"Are you okay, Carol?"
The colleague who had rushed over asked me again, looking at me with concern. "Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for your help. You were just about to go to lunch, right? Shall we go together?" Perhaps I had been more tense than I realized, as I felt the strength leave my shoulders in relief. I invited her to lunch, my treat, as a thank you for helping me, and we went to eat our now delayed meal. When I returned to my desk, thinking that the unexpected incident had taken up quite some time, one of the executives called out to me and led me to the conference room. It seemed I wouldn't be able to catch a break just yet.
"About the commotion earlier, we had the unfortunate timing of having someone from Scott's company here to see us. They want to hear what happened."
As he explained this to me on the way, I felt a chill run down my spine. Unfortunate timing was an understatement. In the end, I had caused trouble for both my own company and theirs. "I deeply apologize for the disturbance." As soon as I entered the room, I bowed deeply. Even if it was a private matter between a divorced couple, I had gotten into a fight with a client company's sales manager right in front of the office. It seemed only natural that they would want to know the details. I explained the full sequence of events leading up to the earlier commotion, as well as the reasons for our divorce. If I tried to gloss over things or lie here, it might end up disadvantaging both my company and theirs. After all, we were dealing with Scott. There was no telling what he might pull. "I can't believe this. You've been through a lot. Our employee has caused you a great deal of trouble. And we apologize for making you discuss your private matters." The client company representative turned pale and apologized profusely after hearing the story. Even those who had been deceived by Scott's facade, thinking there was no way that sales manager could be like that, immediately changed their tune when I played the recordings. The cause of the earlier commotion is all here in these recordings. If Scott tries to tell any lies, then... Of course, with this evidence, we fully trust your side of the story, Carol. When I voiced my concerns, everyone present nodded in agreement. I wasn't sure how things would go on Scott's end, but it seemed I would be able to avoid any disciplinary action for causing the commotion. With that thought, I let out a sigh of relief. 6 months later, accompanied by my lawyer, I decided to have a discussion with Scott and Alan about the future. Of course, it was a discussion about how I wanted absolutely nothing to do with them from now on. But for some unfathomable reason, The words that came out of Scott's mouth were utterly ridiculous.
Carol, we were wrong. I'm sorry. Let's keep doing our best as a family from now on.
What? I couldn't help but let out a discordant voice. As I stood there baffled, Alan added insult to injury.
I was in the wrong, so please, be a real mom to me this time.
I felt goosebumps all over my body. The first thing that popped into my head was just one word: disgusting. Both Scott and Alan had put on that seemingly kind and sincere demeanor they had when they first approached me, trying to ensnare me once again. Now that I knew their true faces, the smiles plastered on their faces only filled me with revulsion. How many women had Scott and Alan deceived like this, I wondered. Even the lawyer accompanying me was visibly on guard.
Don't say such ridiculous things.
That was all I could manage to say in response. As if to protect myself, I gripped my left arm tightly with my right hand. Seeing my sour expression, Scott persisted even further.
Come on, don't say that. Today's discussion is for that purpose, right? Let's properly live as a family again, okay?
His tone was almost coaxing, and I felt a chill run through me. I shook it off and firmly refused.
Absolutely not. I don't want you coming to my office like before. Don't ever come near me again.
At that, Scott, who had been playing nice until then, finally seemed to reach his limit. He slammed his hand on the table with a bang, trying to intimidate me.
You get all high and mighty just because we apologized? Listen up. The only reason we came here today was because we were willing to start over. We're saying we'll remarry you. Who do you think you are?
His nostrils flared as he took deep, excited breaths. Both my lawyer and I stared at him in disbelief. They hadn't changed at all from before. They were just hiding their demonic true selves beneath a kind facade. My lawyer, who had been cowed, came back to his senses and composed himself, broaching the subject anew.
The reason we asked you to come here today is to explain the compensation claim for the divorce trial and to have you promise to refrain from contacting Carol for the rest of your lives.
Saying this as calmly as possible, he placed a single invoice in front of Scott. The moment they laid eyes on the paper titled compensation claim, Scott and Alan bared their teeth, openly displaying their anger.
Huh? Compensation? What compensation are you talking about? You're the one who up and left on your own. The saggy hag is just making false accusations to get money.
The two of them were making a huge fuss, but my lawyer seemed to be getting used to it and handled them without flinching.
Please don't raise your voice. Even that completely immoral behavior of yours is more than enough grounds for a compensation claim. But Scott, you were cheating on her, weren't you? What? Don't be ridiculous. I never cheated.
Faced with the lawyer's stern gaze, Scott's earlier bravado vanished in an instant, and he visibly panicked. It seemed Alan hadn't known about Scott's infidelity and stood there frozen in shock. I took a deep breath and began to speak as calmly as I could. Your behavior was so abnormal that I reached out to your first wife.
What are you doing, going behind my back?
As Scott looked like he was about to lash out, the lawyer silenced him with a look. Once he confirmed that Scott had restrained himself and fallen silent, the lawyer prompted me to continue.
It turns out you were the one who cheated.
I presented a copy of the divorce agreement that Scott's ex-wife had given me, urging me to use it. It proved that Scott's infidelity was the cause of their divorce and that the matter had been settled with Scott at fault. When I met Scott, he had told me that he was the one who had been cheated on, but that was a blatant lie. Scott himself was the one who had cheated.
Your ex-wife told me I should have a detective investigate you right away. Of course, I did so without hesitation. And just as I thought, evidence of your affairs kept popping up one after another.
Saying that, I spread out the detective's investigation report on the table.
I'll offset the property division with the amount you took from me, so you'd better pay the compensation in full.
I glared at him as I said that, and Scott began to tremble, now resorting to begging for forgiveness.
I'm sorry, Carol. I let my guard down and got taken advantage of. I was seduced and had no choice. Please, forgive me. Come on now, hurry up and sign.
I'm busy. I looked down at Scott, who had begun to apologize profusely in an unseemly manner, without any emotion. Then Alan, comparing my coldly dismissive attitude with Scott's pathetic state, started trying to butter me up.
Carol, I'm different. I'm not like my crazy dad. I'm on your side. You're the only real family I have, Carol.
Alan! Even Scott, who had been begging for forgiveness, gaped at Alan in shock over his sudden change. Alan put on his best good boy act and tried to take my hand.
I'm still a child who needs parental protection, so I need your support, Carol.
I brushed off the hand he extended without hesitation. What's with this "I'm still a child" crap? It's so disgusting I might break out in hives. I put some distance between us again and conveyed my revulsion without hiding it.
You're already 18, right? You're a proper adult now, and your actions have consequences. You're smart enough to get into medical school on your first try, so shouldn't you be the one supporting your dad instead?
Cut the crap! Enraged by my words as I tried to protect myself, Scott, who had been groveling on the floor, and Alan, who had been trying to butter me up, finally resorted to violence and swung their fists at me. But their blows never reached me. My lawyer deliberately called the police in a loud voice so that the two agitated men would notice. Realizing the police were on their way, they frantically fled the law office. When the officers arrived just a few minutes later, my lawyer and I explained the situation. They concluded that I should absolutely avoid meeting with Scott and Alan directly from now on. From then on, all communication would be done through my lawyer. Knowing those two, I had thought the compensation claim would likely drag on. But it was settled sooner than I expected. As it turned out, Alan had apparently become a shut-in. You see, when Scott and Alan had caused that commotion in front of my office earlier, some rubbernecker had posted a video online of Alan verbally abusing me. It had blown up due to how terrible it was. Alan, who had been bragging about getting into medical school on his social media with his face visible, was quickly identified and apparently received some pretty awful direct messages. His pride shattered, Alan's spirit seemed to have broken. I heard through the grapevine that he had stopped coming out of his room. As for Scott, his reputation within the company had already hit rock bottom due to the divorce scandal. His demands for us to get back together and the police incident were the final nail in the coffin, and he was being treated like a pariah. His own motivation seemed to be at an all-time low, but with Alan shutting himself in, the debts from the money he had poured into gambling, and the compensation he had to pay me, he apparently couldn't even quit his job. Scott had been demoted from sales manager because of the disturbance he caused in front of our company, his client. Lacking the courage to change jobs in his late 40s, he seemed to be working on inertia. The new person in charge of our account was complaining about him with a give-me-a-break attitude.
This isn't something I should be telling you, Carol, but Scott's misogynistic remarks have become a social issue. But seriously, we're getting complaints from complete strangers. It seemed the new person in charge at the client company had quite a loose tongue. When he found out I was Scott's ex-wife, he started venting and telling me about Scott's current situation without me even asking. I considered requesting a change in who handled our account, not wanting to get involved with them anymore.
But I figured it might be good to stay informed of the situation to avoid any weird ideas, so I left things as they were. Having finally overcome what might have been the greatest hardship of my life, I was now throwing myself into my work more than ever. I had built a good friendship with Scott's ex-wife since she cooperated with me, and it was nice that we could easily keep in touch as fellow single women. We were planning to go out for some delicious drinks together soon. Upon arriving at the Target high-rise apartment, I approached the concierge and was handed the keys to the room. Through the elevator reserved for the higher floors, I made my way to the top floor of the apartment.
Wow, this is lovely.
As the door opened, my sister-in-law, Laura, was the first to leap in, dancing around as she exclaimed, "Let's get unpacking." I called out, but no one offered to help. Predictable, yet it still irked me. The movers placed the boxes where directed, and I was left to unpack alone.
I'll take this spacious room.
Katrina can have the tiny storeroom. My father-in-law, Harrison, and my mother-in-law, Rosalind, went ahead and decided who was getting which room. But I ignored them and continued my work.
This room is really nice. It would make a great final home.
Good for us. My husband, Oliver, and the in-laws said to each other, all smiles.
It feels like a dream to live in such a house,
Laura said with her eyes brimming with tears. It might be time to reveal the truth.
Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh?
My name is Katrina. I'm a 32-year-old freelance illustrator. I used to work for a major publishing company, but went independent and now mainly take on projects from my former employer, while also starting to work as a children's book author. I married Oliver 2 years ago, and we began living together in the apartment I've been residing in. The reason we live in my house is that it's my property, and Oliver, who was renting elsewhere, moved in with me. My parents died in a car accident when I was young. Afterwards, I was raised by my grandparents, and after graduating from college and securing a job, I bought this apartment. The payment was made using the compensation and insurance money received from my parents' accident. My grandparents raised me without touching that money and gave it to me to use for myself when I graduated college. I bought this place because my grandparents entered a nursing home. They had reserved a spot in the nursing facility, intending to move in together after raising me, not wanting me to bear the burden of their care. After much thought, I decided to buy this convenient apartment, which was also close to the nursing home my grandparents were in. My grandparents said there were other things I could spend the money on, but to me, this was the best use. I have been living here for almost 10 years now. The 10 years I spent with my parents and the 10 years I spent with my grandparents are nearly equal. I've been living in this apartment a third of my life, and I have grown quite attached to this place. I met Oliver at a friend's wedding after-party. He was a colleague of my friend's husband. We were of the same age and formed a group that started hanging out together. Over time, several couples formed from this group, and a few have married. And one of those couples was Oliver and I. Oliver was cheerful and seemed to brighten the room just by being there. From our first meeting, I was attracted to him. I admired his cheerful nature, something I lacked, and thought he was a wonderful person. However, that was only the face Oliver showed to the world, and I quickly learned about his other side after we got married. While Oliver was very gentlemanly during our courtship, he turned out to be the type who changes once the marriage is set. No, it was worse than that. After we got married, he said something unbelievable. "Since I'm living in your house, you should take care of the living expenses."
What do you mean?
The expenses would be the same even if I weren't here, right? So, you should continue to cover them as you have been. I think that's how it should be. Indeed, my apartment was already paid off, with no mortgage remaining. However, there were still maintenance fees, a sinking fund for repairs, and property tax. And since we have a car, there's also the parking fee.
So, those are expenses you'd be paying even if I weren't here, right? That's true, but then there should be no problem with you continuing to pay them as usual.
His argument seemed reasonable at first glance, but was fundamentally flawed.
But Oliver, you're living here now, too. We agreed to split the living expenses. I'd really appreciate it if you could contribute.
When I said this, Oliver's eyes narrowed angrily.
You're so money-grubbing! I never thought you were that kind of woman.
I was stunned and speechless. To me, it was obvious that as a married couple, we would share our lives equally. I had naturally assumed we would split the expenses for our home.
I'm not saying I won't contribute anything. I'll definitely pay half for my part. But you own this house, right?
So, he meant since it's my property, I should bear the costs.
I'll pay for my own necessities, isn't that fair enough?
Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. In the beginning, Oliver did pay half the living expenses as promised. But only the half that I billed him for.
This month's electricity bill came to this amount. That seems quite high. You're probably wasting money working from home?
I had quit my job while dating Oliver and started working freelance. Though I occasionally went out for meetings and networking, most of my work was done from home.
It doesn't seem fair.
First, Oliver complained about the high utility bills.
Unfair? How so? Well, I work outside almost all day. And I'm supposed to pay for your electricity use while you work from home?
What a reasoning. I was too astounded to respond.
I only use a little when I come home to sleep. So, I don't have to pay half, right?
Following this logic, Oliver began paying only a minimal amount. The same went for gas and water bills. Still, I tolerated it. Sure, Oliver was only home for a short time. And having an extra person did significantly increase the utility bills. But it was impossible to calculate exactly how much each of us used. Despite his complaints, we did share the living expenses, so I silently accepted his reasoning. Looking back, I can't believe how foolish I was, but at the time, I thought it was necessary. I decided it was better to endure and keep our marital life peaceful than to fight over something trivial from the start. Aside from money issues, Oliver was as bright and fun as before we got married. Though the financial concern always lingered in the back of my mind, I didn't struggle to live without his contributions. And I valued our happy times more. But the supposed happiness began to feel increasingly precarious.
More overtime today, they really need to get it together.
Oliver started coming home later, sounding annoyed.
Are you okay with all this overtime? There's a guideline that working over a certain number of hours a month is dangerous. You don't understand. Those are just nominal figures. A good salesman isn't just working the hours logged on the time card.
Oliver said this disdainfully.
Katrina, you've had to pull all-nighters to meet deadlines, right? Yes, that's true. That's my point. Don't be fooled by just the apparent numbers.
I graduated from an art college and worked as an illustrator. So I really didn't know much about sales. Faced with his assertion, I had no choice but to believe him.
I understand. But please, don't overdo it.
I know. You're kind, Katrina. I won't push myself too hard. Oliver reassured me gently, embracing my shoulder. I tried to believe in Oliver's kindness forcefully, as if believing was the only way to keep my peace of mind. Gradually, I felt increasingly betrayed by Oliver over the year. They say people can react to sudden pain, but become desensitized to slow, incremental pain. By that point, Oliver's betrayals had accumulated significantly, yet I felt I was just enduring a little longer, spending my days pretending not to notice for the sake of peace. Then, a significant event occurred.
My family's coming over soon, is that okay?
One morning, Oliver suddenly mentioned this.
Harrison and Rosalind? And Laura too?
I had visited his family's home once before we married, for a family meeting. It was a small house in the countryside. It seemed to be a fairly old house, and every part of it was old, but my parents-in-law were living there. At that time, Laura had already moved out after getting married, so I wasn't able to meet her. We did message her, but as she couldn't come due to her schedule, but gave us a message, "Welcome to the family." Since we didn't have a wedding ceremony and only took photos, that was the only time I met his parents. Of course, I never had a chance to meet Laura. Our friends held a party for us to congratulate, but I still hadn't met Oliver's relatives. As I didn't have much interaction with my own relatives, and I did not find it so strange. Now, suddenly, his parents and Laura were coming to visit. It wasn't odd for them to want to see how we were doing after a year of marriage. Without any doubt, I agreed to Oliver's words. A week later, as promised, the in-laws came to our house.
"This is your place? It's not very big, is it?"
That was the first thing they said as they entered our home. Of course, it's not big. This house was originally bought for me to live in alone. It has 3 rooms and a spacious living dining area. One room is almost used as a storage, and the remaining rooms served as my office and bedroom. When Oliver started living with me, he wanted a space to work from home, so I gave up my office for Oliver's study. And now I work in the living room. It's spacious enough for 2 people to live without any inconvenience. As I was thinking this, Laura, whom I was meeting for the first time after Rosalind, entered the house.
"You're right, it's smaller than I thought. Are we going to live here together?"
"It's small, but bear with it. They say any place becomes comfortable if you live in it."
"Well, it's better than nothing.
I'll manage to live here." "How long do they intend to stay?" As I pondered vaguely, Oliver commanded me with an irritated voice.
"Hey, what are you dozing off for? Hurry up and carry in my parents' luggage."
"What? Oh, sorry.
Which ones are their luggage?"
I thought it would be just enough luggage for a short stay, maybe a duffel bag. But when I looked inside the entrance, I couldn't find anything.
"What are you looking at? It's outside."
Rushing to the entrance, I saw about 10 cardboard boxes piled up in the hallway. Cardboard boxes for a visit to their son's house? I didn't understand the meaning, but leaving such things in the hallway would bother other residents. Fortunately, none of the boxes were too heavy, and I somehow managed to bring all of them into the living room by myself. Since it's a living dining area, it's quite spacious. Although it's obstructive, stacking them up secured enough space to place them. During this time, Oliver and the in-laws were sitting and talking.
"Make coffee once you're done with the luggage. Hurry up, everyone is tired."
I couldn't think properly due to the situation and moved reflexively to Oliver's words.
"You really are so inconsiderate.
I'm worried about our future."
"I'll sleep in this room."
While I was cluelessly making coffee, Laura declared our bedroom as her room. "Ah, that's fine. I'll clean up the storage with Mom, and when we're done, we'll sleep together."
"It'll be nice to sleep with Oliver after a long time."
Sleeping closely with family, how nice. Oliver and his parents acted as if I didn't exist, enjoying their family time. Our house only has a bedroom, a storage room, and what now serves as Oliver's study, which was my former office. Where am I supposed to sleep? And how long will this lifestyle continue? It seems humans can't think properly when faced with situations far beyond their usual understanding. While I was stunned, everything had already ended. The next day, no, from the moment the in-laws moved in, hell began.
Hey, isn't the food ready yet?
Sorry, I'm preparing it now. You're really slow. Oliver must have a lot of patience to put up with someone like you. The in-laws lazed around the house all day, doing nothing, and treated me like a servant. At first, I endured it, thinking it would only be for a few days. But listening to the conversations between the in-laws and Oliver, it became clear that this was going to be a permanent situation, and I awakened. Here's the summary. The in-laws had fled from their hometown because Laura had returned home after getting divorced. The reason for the divorce was Laura's infidelity. She had affairs with multiple people. All of this came to light recently, and her ex-husband demanded compensation, which they couldn't afford, so they fled here. Oliver had told me that his in-laws owned their home, but that was a lie. Originally, that house belonged to Rosalind's real family, where her parents lived. Rosalind and Harrison moved in with them because they couldn't afford to live by themselves. And after Rosalind's parents passed away, they just stayed there. The real owner was Rosalind's brother, and he asked them to leave, but they stayed, claiming residency rights. Rosalind's brother had his own home, so he couldn't force his sister's family to move out. He had requested them to leave, but couldn't do no more than that. Then, with Laura returning with a mountain of compensation to pay, Rosalind and Harrison tried to sell the house to raise money. Rosalind's brother, upon learning the situation, was furious and threatened legal action. That's why the in-laws showed up at our place with all the belongings she could carry. Those belongings, 10 boxes of them, the ones I struggled to bring into our house the day they arrived, representing their entire fortune. I don't know what's inside, and frankly, I don't want to know, but it seems there's nothing of real value that could be called a fortune. In short, the in-laws moved in with us because they were broke. And it looks like they plan to live off of us indefinitely. In such a family, Oliver was miraculously smart. He was good at his studies and managed to graduate from college on a scholarship. You wouldn't guess he's part of that family just by looking at him. He continued to play the role of a refreshing, fine young man, got a job at a well-known company, and then met and married me. I couldn't see through Oliver's true nature or the real face of the in-laws. My parents had already passed away, so I'm all alone. But I'm working and already own a house. To Oliver, I must have seemed like a perfect target. No way, I'm not going to let this happen to myself. Now that I know everything, I refuse to quietly become their slave. I won't let this no-good family take advantage of me. I started planning my retaliation and took action the very next day. For now, I had to act submissive. I couldn't let Oliver or the in-laws catch on to my plan. I had to catch them off guard. Just like how they suddenly showed up here. After pretending to listen to the in-laws for about a week, one day, Laura said to me, "Give me some money." Laura demanded, extending her open right hand. She was so blatantly freeloading. It was irritating, but I had decided not to resist for now. I handed Laura a few bills.
"Is this all? Don't you have more?"
"I don't have more on me right now since this was sudden."
"Then a credit card will do."
"Absolutely not. If I gave her a card, there's no telling what she'd do with it." "I can't lend you a card. I'll withdraw some money from the bank tomorrow. Please wait until then." I managed to quiet the complaining in-laws by making that promise. I wouldn't give them the card no matter what. That night, after Oliver came home, he complained about it. "You could have just lent them the card. You're really stingy with money." I was appalled by his words, but I apologized, thinking it over. "I'm sorry. I thought there could be problems if something happened."
"Like what?" I was afraid of lending a card with a different name, and if Rosalind and Harrison got arrested for misuse, I couldn't do it.
Oliver seemed satisfied with this reason.
Then, make a family card for my mom and dad. I'm counting on you.
Understood. I replied as such, but I had no intention of making one. About a month later, Oliver asked about the status of the family card. Maybe the in-laws, having received money several times, found it troublesome and urged Oliver to ask for the card.
I'm sorry, but it seems I can't make it,
I said, feigning disappointment. I hadn't applied for a family card and wasn't disappointed at all.
Why not? Rosalind and the others are considered relatives, not family, so it doesn't work. Apparently, it's not okay just to live here temporarily.
The in-laws had just rolled in without permission, and no proper arrangements had been made for living together.
They haven't even changed the address registration, so it seems like there's no actual residence.
I see. Faced with this explanation, Oliver seemed to have no choice but to accept. Well, then we just need to change the address registration.
That's right, since we're going to live here anyway. Go ahead and take care of the procedures.
What a nerve for them to order me to do so.
About that, I think this house is a bit small for us to live in permanently. Now that you mention it, maybe that's why you haven't been coming home much lately.
When I said that, Oliver looked a bit puzzled.
I've been staying at hotels because I've been working late. Oh, that must be tough. So, I was thinking, why don't we move out of this house?
Oliver and the in-laws were surprised by my suggestion.
This house was originally bought for me to live alone, and while Oliver and I could barely make do, it's definitely too small in the current situation.
Indeed. Look at this. Wouldn't you want to live in a house like this? I showed them the brochure for a new apartment. It was a recently completed high-rise building. The brochure featured photos of a top-floor apartment. Spacious, with large windows offering a view of the city below.
How are you able to get an apartment like this?
I thought our current place was too cramped, so I decided to go for it.
I sold this place and added my parents' inheritance and savings to buy it. That's great. This place isn't bad, but that one is definitely better.
Laura and Oliver, who had been looking skeptically, relaxed when they learned the payment was already complete.
Wow, you've got some sense. I'm seeing you in a new light for the first time.
Yeah, I guess I can acknowledge you as Oliver's wife. The in-laws nodded in agreement with smiles. And just like that, the move was settled smoothly. About a month later, the day of the move arrived. It was a bit sad to say goodbye to the house we had lived in for so long, but it was for a brighter future. Once the belongings were loaded into 2 trucks, we headed to our new destination. Upon arriving at the high-rise and speaking to the concierge, we were handed the keys to our apartment. To our top-floor apartment via the high-rise exclusive elevator.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Laura was the first to dash in, exclaiming as if dancing.
Let's get unpacking.
I called out, but no one offered to help. As expected, but still infuriating. The movers placed the brought items were directed, and I began unpacking alone.
I'll take this spacious room. Katrina can have the tiny storage.
The in-laws were assigning rooms as they pleased, but I ignored them and continued my work.
This room is truly wonderful. A great choice for our final home. I'm glad you feel that way.
Oliver and the in-laws were all smiles, exchanging such words.
It's like a dream to live in a house like this,
Laura said, teary-eyed. Now, it might be a good time for the reveal.
Huh? Whose house are you talking about? Huh?
A good moment to show the in-laws reality.
Why would you all live here? What are you talking about? It's our new home. We're the ones who will live here. Huh? I feigned exaggerated surprise. This isn't your house. I bought this place to live with my grandparents. You asked if we wanted to live in a house like this. Laura began to make a scene, raising her voice. Yes, I did ask if you wanted to live here, but that's all I did. I never said you could live here. Just as I said, I never mentioned living together. Who would want to live with these people forever? So, please leave now. I am the owner of this house. The landlord is telling you to leave. Please comply before things get complicated. Don't be ridiculous. Oliver stomped his feet in anger, his face turning red. The only thing you should be doing is listening to me. My family and I will live in this house. If you don't like it, you should leave. That's right. Get out. That's right. Leave. Oliver and the in-laws were pressuring me to leave. I contacted the concierge directly through the intercom on the wall. Excuse me, there are some strange people refusing to leave my house and trying to kick me out, the actual resident. Please come immediately. As soon as I finished speaking, a siren sounded throughout the room. What's this? So noisy. Make it stop right now. The security staff arrived promptly after the alert. This is a high-end condominium after all. These people are the building security. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police next. When the security officer pressed the doorbell and asked what happened, the in-laws started panicking. They realized what I said wasn't a lie. Although the security staff arrived, the in-laws pleaded, crawling on the ground, asking to be heard. I decided to listen, curious about what Oliver had been telling them. Oliver had been telling the in-laws I was a pitiable woman with no relatives, and that I couldn't live without him. So that's why he was keeping me here. And that they could use me as they pleased, like a housekeeper. That was what he had been telling his own parents. I felt sympathy for the in-laws who provided such valuable testimony. Actually, when I gave money to the in-laws, I made them sign a paper with the amount written on it. Essentially, it was a promissory note. I want proof that I've handed it over properly to show Oliver. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. If you sign it, I'll give you as much as you want. Knowing they could get as much money as they wanted just by signing, the in-laws easily complied. Thanks to that, I had proof of how much I had lent them. I had been thinking of collecting from the in-laws, but it seemed impossible for them to pay back. So I decided to take it from Oliver instead and thought it best to evict them from the apartment. Thanks to this, you've helped me a lot. If you leave now, I'll consider this never happened, but if you come back, you'll have to pay everything all at once. As I showed them the promissory note and said this, the in-laws finally gave up and left. I'm Katrina's husband. I have the right to live here. I won't leave. Oliver refused to move. If that's how you feel, let's settle this here and now. All right, let's have a little talk then. But if you try anything funny, I'll call them right back. I thanked the security guards and sent them back home. Why are you doing this? Did you dislike my family that much? Of course I do. They suddenly show up, treating me like slaves in a sneak attack. I made it clear to Oliver. Fine. If you dislike them that much, I'll tell my mom and dad to leave. But I can stay, right? I was astounded. He was planning to abandon his in-laws just so he could stay. What a despicable man. No, you need to leave too. Why? We're married, aren't we? I presented Oliver with a folder. What is this? Oliver turned pale as he looked inside the folder. A pretty woman, isn't she? I heard you've been living together for half the week lately.
It was evidence of Oliver's affair. There were tons of photos of the two looking cozy, arm in arm, walking together, entering a hotel. Oliver had started dating her right after marrying me.
I heard you had plans to live with her in that apartment once we were separated. Lies! Who would say such a thing?
I turned on the voice recorder I was holding. The voice of the other woman played, and Oliver froze. The evidence was obtained by a detective agency. They approached the woman, kindly informed her that Oliver was married, and recorded what she had to say. The woman proudly claimed that Oliver was in the midst of divorce proceedings, and once he kicked out his wife, they would live together in Oliver's apartment. Oliver told his affair partner he wanted to divorce, but I wouldn't agree, and after being worn out by the in-laws, I would quietly leave. The affair partner believed she was the only one Oliver loved, thinking the marriage had already cooled off. True love will prevail, she laughed. But when she realized she was talking to someone from a detective agency, she panicked and started to cover for herself. She claimed she was also deceived by Oliver, truly believing the marriage was over. She begged for forgiveness, promising to tell everything. The detective asked me what to do, and upon saying it depended on what she said, she spilled everything not even asked for. All of that was recorded. I guess true love seems quite fragile.
Yes, I got the evidence. Looks like this is going to cost a pretty penny in damages.
Oliver collapsed weakly onto the floor.
Your stuff is already sent to that woman's condo, so you can start living there from today. Now, leave.
I called the concierge again and had Oliver, who was still drained, thrown out. As promised, I decided not to delve further into the affair partner. Her testimony was enough to prove Oliver's maliciousness. Thanks to that, I was able to get a substantial amount in damages from Oliver. It was enough to forgive him. However, I made sure to inform the woman's parents and her company. I hadn't promised not to tell anyone, so it should be fine to talk. The woman was Oliver's junior at work. They got close as they worked together. It would have been a nice story if they weren't married. I complained to the company about what kind of employee training they were providing, which led to our divorce. The company apologized for the lack of supervision. Concerned about their social reputation, the company made the woman resign under the guise of voluntary resignation. Oliver was demoted and transferred from the head office to a subsidiary as a punishment. During work hours, the two of them would concoct lies about sales meetings and sneak off to hotels, or take trips together and claim them as business expenses. Given the harm they caused the company, such actions seemed justified to them. I heard through the grapevine that the in-laws are now living together in her apartment for real. It's your fault things have ended up like this, take responsibility. That's what they say, squatting in the condominium where Oliver and the woman live. Oliver and the woman had to take out loans to pay me compensation. Now they live a difficult life, struggling every day to repay their debt. It might be about time to finally kick the in-laws out, I suppose. Oliver thought I was just some pitiful woman, burdened with grandparents who were in a care facility, but the reality was a bit different. My grandparents were indeed in a facility, but it was a luxurious place where wealthy people live gracefully. They used to run a company and had planned to pass it on to my parents, but they died young. So they retired after handing it over to someone they could trust. That was the year I graduated from college. I've loved drawing since I was a child and have won numerous awards for it. I told my grandparents I wanted to work in art, so they never forced me to take over the company. They decided to move into that facility so I could live freely as I wished. I followed my dreams into a career related to art, and now I'm becoming known as a children's book author. My illustrated books have become a big hit, and I'm now somewhat of a celebrity. I feel like my luck has turned around dramatically since splitting up with Oliver. He must be regretting it by now. I bought that high-rise apartment with the money from selling that condo, my parents' inheritance, and my book royalties. I wanted to live with my grandparents again while they were still healthy. Of course, I'm keeping the facility as an option. It's necessary for when either of my grandparents becomes physically incapacitated and needs extensive care. But for now, they're both still healthy. Thanks to my book sales, I can finally give back to my grandparents. We can live happily together for a while longer. Though I went through some hardships because of that man, my future is looking bright. With this, I'll finally get the inheritance. Right before losing consciousness, I heard my husband's voice. I had just finished a hospital visit and was about to head home when suddenly a car sped towards me. I realized it too late to escape and was hit. Amidst the intense pain and fading consciousness, I heard what my husband had said. What did he mean by inheritance? Why was he even here? As I tried to make sense of it, I lost consciousness without seeing him. 3 days later, I woke up and saw on the TV that my husband was acting the part of a grieving, loving husband. I was furious. He was garnering sympathy while pretending to be a good person, even though he had schemed everything. I couldn't let him have his way anymore and decided to seek revenge. I am Jennifer Brown, 29 years old. A music teacher. I've always loved the piano and dreamed of becoming a pianist since childhood. After practicing desperately every day, I managed to get into a music college, but I was overwhelmed by the high level of competition and eventually gave up. I obtained a teaching license and became a music teacher. Currently, I work at a local public middle school, where I'm not just a teacher but also the advisor of the choir club, leading a busy life. Being a teacher is tough, but the kids admire me calling teacher, so I was enjoying fulfilling days. Last year, I married Robert, whom I had dated since college. We were at the peak of happiness in both our personal and professional lives, but it didn't last. My husband Robert was just a mess. He worked at a bar, and because of the nature of his job, he had late shift. Our daily rhythms were completely different, and we began to drift apart. He often drinks after work, so I find him sleeping at the entrance returning home drunk in the morning. Initially, I thought it was just part of his job. But when I came home tired from work, I found clothes thrown about, and the table littered with empty instant noodle cups and finished drink bottles. Seeing this mess every day, my anger just kept building up. Robert, put your clothes in the laundry. And can you clean up your mess? What? Stop nagging. I'll do it later. Later? You always say that and never do it. Do it now. Frowning, Robert clicked his tongue in annoyance. If it bothers you so much, do it yourself. You're such a nagging woman. What? I'm tired from work every day. Why do I have to take care of you? Can't you at least take care of your own things? I'm tired too, you know. Do you think you're the only one? Or do you think you're superior to me because you earn more? I denied that, and Robert sighed. Then you should do it. Don't order me around like that. Saying this, Robert lazily lay down on the sofa and started fiddling with his mobile phone. Despite shorter working hours than me, he never helped with housework and just drank around and slept at home. I ended up doing all the cleaning and laundry. Recently, our dates had stopped and we just argued more. Robert was very handsome. He was popular in college that he even had fans from neighboring universities. I felt superior just being able to marry him. I was smitten with the gentlemanly Robert during our courtship, but now I wondered why I married him. However, everyone has their good and bad sides. I thought maybe it was okay for someone handsome to have a flawed personality, so I decided to bear with it. Half a year after getting married, Robert, who usually went out even on his days off, seemed restless one morning. When I finished cleaning up after breakfast, he called me. Actually, the bar's been doing poorly lately. I'm short on cash. Can you lend me some?
What? Are you that short on money? What did you spend it on? He had been saying for months that his salary had decreased and he couldn't pay living expenses. But his salary was supposed to be entirely disposable, yet he claimed to be short on money. You know, sometimes I go out for drinks with friends. Alcohol costs a lot. If it's really for the shop, you should get reimbursed for expenses. It's ridiculous to pay out of your own pocket. No, it's not that. I mean, I need it for studying. I have to know other bars' menus and stuff for research. Robert's stammering explanation seemed suspicious. How much do you need? You'll give it to me? $200. Just $200 is fine. I sighed, and Robert happily hugged me. I was exasperated by his opportunistic behavior, but it was exactly this kind of charm that always ensnared me. I took out $200 from my wallet and handed it to him. He hugged me again. I really made the right choice marrying Jennifer. Thank you so much. Because of our constant fighting these days, I felt over the moon when he hugged me while I was exasperated with him. I felt like I had to support him, who had a tough job. But then, he started asking for money almost every month. The amount he wanted kept increasing, and before I knew it, I was giving him as much as $1,000 monthly. For me, just a teacher, it was quite tough to pay $1,000 in addition to regular living expenses. Despite my efforts to save, my savings were rapidly depleting. Robert, can you pay back even a little of the money I gave you? What? Why all of a sudden? You gave me that money, why should I give it back? It's getting hard to make ends meet. If I keep giving you money, I won't be able to pay for gas or water. When I spoke to Robert before he went to work, he made a face as if it was a hassle. I can't help it, my salary is too low. You could if you tried to save a bit, like cutting down on eating out. I'm doing that for the bar. Are you trying to interfere with my work? Then sell your piano. That'll bring in good money. Saying that, he left the house. My piano is as precious to me as life itself. It was a gift from my father when I was 2 years old. I need it for practice as a music teacher, there's no way I can part with it. Yet, Robert, who casually drinks around, coldly suggested selling it, which infuriated me. After that, Robert and I stopped speaking. He didn't try to talk to me either, and our marital relationship was practically in ruins. I was contemplating divorce when an incident occurred. While playing the piano, a pain shot through my wrist. The pain, like an electric shock from the wrist to the fingertips, became unbearable. When I visited the hospital, I was diagnosed with tendinitis. If it gets worse, you might need surgery, so you should get a thorough examination at a bigger hospital. Told this at a nearby clinic, I was given a referral letter. Then, I headed to the general hospital in the next town. If my wrist pain worsens, I might not be able to play the piano anymore. And if I can't play, I might lose my job. If that happens, I don't know what to do to make a living. Having focused solely on playing the piano and not having done any other job, I thought changing careers would be difficult. Before the consultation, I felt anxious and heavy-footed. However, the doctor, after seeing the X-rays, smiled and said it was okay. Let's observe for now. If possible, please rest your hand. Don't play the piano for about a week, and if the pain worsens, come back for another visit. I was relieved to hear that it wasn't serious enough for surgery. It happened when I stepped out the parking, just as I was about to leave the hospital triumphantly. Watch out! I heard a woman scream and turned around in shock to see a car speeding towards me. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move properly. Then, an immense impact hit my body. It's an accident! Call an ambulance! Get a doctor! I heard various voices. Amidst fading consciousness, a familiar voice reached my ears. With this, the inheritance plan will work out. I heard a distinctly familiar voice amidst the others. But I lost consciousness before I could identify the speaker. 3 days later. I woke up to the ceiling of a hospital room.
When I tried to sit up, intense pain shot through my body. Ow, it hurts.
Ms. Brown!
Can you hear me?
I'll go get the doctor, just wait here.
I couldn't respond to the nurse's voice. She hurried out, and then the doctor came running.
Ms. Brown, do you know where you are?
The hospital?
Correct. You were hit by a car after your last visit and have been hospitalized. You haven't woken up for 3 days, so we were worried.
I was shocked to hear it had been 3 days, but I couldn't voice it. The nurse and doctor then explained my current situation. I had been hit by a car and suffered multiple complex fractures throughout my body. I was still in a period of absolute rest, not even allowed to sit up.
It must be boring just lying there. Do you want to watch TV? You can watch it while lying down.
The nurse turned on the TV for me, ensuring my comfort. Coincidentally, the TV was covering my accident.
Oh, you probably don't want to see this, do you? Should I change the channel?
No, please leave it. I want to watch. I couldn't take my eyes off the news. It reported that a woman named Amelia, who hit me with her car, was arrested for dangerous driving causing injury. Seeing the perpetrator's photo, everything made sense to me. Then I realized that the voice talking about receiving an inheritance when I was hit was Robert's. He had intentionally run me over with a car for money. However, the news only reported that he was in Amelia's car as a friend, nothing more. The screen switched to Robert.
I never imagined that the car I was in would cause an accident and hit my wife. I keep seeing that scene in my dreams. I can't sleep at night.
I exploded with anger at his tearful interview. This accident was undoubtedly schemed by Robert. I couldn't stand him causing me this accident for inheritance and then continuing to act like a good husband. Determined not to let Robert have his way anymore, I vowed revenge. 4 hours after waking up, Robert burst into the room, panting.
Jennifer! Thank goodness you're awake!
I shook off Robert's hand as he tried to grasp mine uninvited.
What's wrong?
Are you still in pain?
Yes, I am.
My whole body is in excruciating pain, all because of you.
What are you talking about?
The atmosphere grew tense, making even the nearby nurse's expressions stiffen. Trying to lighten the mood, Robert forced a smile.
Are you still confused? Is there anything you want to eat?
I'll go buy it.
I don't want anything. Can you please leave my room right now?
Why are you saying that?
Jennifer, you're acting strange.
It's not strange at all.
The accident was schemed by you for the inheritance, wasn't it?
Robert looked surprised at my words.
What are you talking about? Why would I do something like that? Really? Then why did you take out a high-value life insurance policy a month before the accident? You said you couldn't even afford to pay the living expenses because your salary was low. I was told it's good to have insurance in case something happens. Amelia, the girl who hit Jennifer with her car, she works in insurance sales. She used to work part-time at my bar.
Robert had given the same explanation when he took out the insurance. They had been close since her part-time days, and after she got a job at an insurance company, they kept in touch. He said he felt sorry for her as she was struggling to sell policies. As he worried about getting scolded by her boss and having low pay, he decided to take out a policy to help her out. The insurance was taken out because you, Jennifer, earn more than me, right? If something happened and you couldn't work, it would be a problem, so I contracted the insurance for you. Isn't that reasonable? Hearing that, it seemed like his explanation might not be wrong. You're in a situation where you have to borrow money from me and can't pay the living expenses, yet you can afford insurance premiums? If you can pay that much, why not repay me? Don't say that. I got the insurance for your sake. Robert said this while holding my hand. His expression looked genuinely concerned, but I couldn't bring myself to trust him. If that's the case, you won't mind if the insurance money doesn't come in, right? I need quite a lot of money for surgery and hospitalization. I'll use the insurance money we received, so please transfer the entire amount to my account. What? All of it? Is that much really necessary? It might be. If it's not enough, will you pay the rest, Robert? What? Not enough. That can't be true. Robert's face stiffened as he muttered to himself. Seeing him like this, the nurses also cast suspicious glances. I beckoned Robert to come closer and whispered so only he could hear. It's useless to lie anymore. There isn't much insurance money because I'm alive, and there's zero inheritance. You must be disappointed. Robert frowned upon hearing this. Zero inheritance? What do you mean? It means there's almost no savings. Did you think you would get all my money if I was gone? Why is there none? You're a public servant, you earn well, right? Robert's voice grew louder, and a nurse frowned upon overhearing him. I was lending money to you, Robert. How much do you think a teacher's salary is? I'm still in my 20s, I don't earn that much. Plus, there are living expenses to pay. I never had any financial leeway. You've got to be kidding. What was all this for, then? Robert hung his head, clutching at his forehead. My anger surged at his true nature showing. You won't get away with this easily. You'll be arrested too if they find out you were an accomplice. No one will believe that. Did you see the news? I'm the devoted husband worried about his wife. No one will believe anything you say. They'll just think you've gone mad from hitting your head. While saying this, Robert laughed. You can say that now, but not for long. I replied calmly to Robert's provocation. Then, he looked at me with a cold gaze. Don't get cocky. You should have just gone to the other world. I despised him for saying such things so casually. I sighed, waiting for the moment of revenge. Just as I sighed, the door of the hospital room opened abruptly, and men in a suit entered. Who the hell are you? We're the police. Is what you just said true? What? What are you talking about? I'm just worried about my wife. Ignoring Robert, who was sweating and panicking, the police reached for my bedside and took out a mobile phone. The phone was in the middle of a call. We've heard everything. Even the part about she should have gone to the other world. What? Why are the police? He turned pale and started to tremble. I called them. I wanted their help to uncover the truth about the accident. Thanks to you, I could fully expose your true nature. What, you? Officer, this is a misunderstanding. I just have a quick temper, and I thought Jennifer was picking a fight, so I snapped. It's not really about the money. No one will believe those words now. Then show me evidence that I'm the perpetrator of the accident. Robert kicked the bed in frustration. I glared at him and turned to the police. The woman currently arrested, Amelia, is his mistress. They've been close for quite a while. What? Don't say such nonsense without evidence. There is evidence. I had hired a private detective agency to investigate you. We have photos of you with Amelia and records of your activities over the past few months. Lying won't help you now. Ever since Robert frequently started asking me for money, I suspected he was in debt and hired a private detective agency investigate. The investigation revealed that he was having an affair, spending money on drinks and hotels daily. Knowing his mistress's face, I was certain he was involved in the accident when I saw her on the news. The police were making a phone call to search my house while listening to the conversation. Meanwhile, Robert was sweating and visibly shaken. So you ran out of money I gave you, and planned this accident to get the inheritance and insurance money, planning to live with her, isn't that right? That's just your wild imagination. Then I'll take the insurance money. Withdraw it now and bring it to me. Robert fell silent. It seems like he doesn't want to give up the money at all. Even though Robert refuses to hand over the insurance money despite the situation, the surrounding skepticism grows. I've heard from the police. They're concerned about how much you've been worrying about that woman. Well, she's my friend, it's natural to be concerned. The police told me they're concerned about how much you worry about the other woman.
You're not even mad at Amelia for what happened to me. And why were you at the hospital that day, at that time?
It was a weekday morning when I went to the hospital. Robert should have been getting ready for work around noon, and it was the time when I finished my appointment. Yet, he was inexplicably near a hospital in a neighboring city.
I just happened to have a day off. On your day off, you were at the hospital? There are no places around there that you would visit. You weren't being treated there, so there must have been some reason you were there.
Robert was speechless, sweating profusely. The police then restrained him.
We'll ask for the details at the station. Please come with us. Wait. I'm not guilty. It's all a misunderstanding by Jennifer.
His desperate excuses were ignored by the police, who remained unfazed with a stern expression.
Officer, if he had planned the accident, what kind of punishment could he face? Well, if it's premeditated, it could be attempted murder. We need to hear the full story first, though. Attempted murder? Help me! Jennifer, I'm not guilty! Forgive me!
Robert, pale as a ghost, shook off the police's grip and clung to my bed.
I admit I was wrong for cheating and borrowing money. I'm sorry. But this time, I was just in the car. I'm not guilty. Before I lost consciousness, I heard your voice, Robert, saying now we'll get the inheritance as planned. How can I forgive someone who did this for money?
When I spoke up, he started making unbelievable statements.
What? Are you sure about that? If I get arrested, it will reflect badly on you too. You'll have trouble at work. It's in your best interest to be careful.
Why should I forgive you?
Do you even realize what you've done? I plan to divorce you, and whether you get arrested or not is none of my concern.
I sighed in exasperation at his shocked expression.
Wait! Talking about divorce at a time like this? What do you mean? How can I live without Jennifer?
I made a further attack on Robert, who held his head in despair.
That's not my problem. Just so you know, I was planning to divorce even without this incident. I have proof of your infidelity, and I'll get a hefty compensation in the divorce trial. Compensation in a divorce trial? How can I possibly pay that? If I get arrested, I'll lose my job too. That's your own fault for committing a crime. You should have thought twice before doing such things.
Robert then knelt down, defeated.
I was tricked. Amelia said to me, if you wanted money, you should have just taken out insurance and staged an accident. Initially, I was supposed to drive, but since my license was suspended, she decided to drive. It's all her fault,
Robert shouted. Hearing Robert try to lighten his sentence even in this situation, I couldn't contain my fury.
Tricked or not, I don't care. I'll never forget you saying I should have gone to the other world. That was your true feeling. That's a lie. I didn't mean it. I can't believe such words. I never want to have anything to do with you again, Robert. I'll consult a lawyer about the divorce, so never contact me again. No! That's a lie! Stop it! I'm not bad! Let go!
He started to thrash around, but he was warned that further resistance could lead to obstruction of justice charges, and he quietly left the hospital room with the police. The next day, I learned from the news that Robert had been arrested. The once kind and grieving husband was now vilified as a criminal who plotted murder for insurance money. Over a decade later, I heard that he was released from prison. He had been fired from his job and struggled to find new employment due to his criminal record. Apparently, he was now working at a grocery store. I saw on social media that he is often reprimanded at work for having a lot to learn. As his case was reported in national news, he's well known to many. Apparently, people recognize him and take his photos without permission, making him uncomfortable. The photos show him looking significantly aged and unkempt, likely due to financial struggles. It's sad to see such a drastic change in someone who was once celebrated for his looks during his college days. Despite feeling this way, I cannot forgive him. I hope he spends his life reflecting on his actions. After everything that happened, I resigned from the school where I was working and moved out of state. There, I found a job as a piano teacher. Miraculously, my hands were not permanently damaged from the accident, and I was able to play the piano again. Now, I am remarried to a different man, and we are blessed with 2 daughters, living happily as a family of 4. When I married Robert, I chose him based on his looks. However, this experience taught me a painful lesson about not judging people by their appearance. My current husband may not be conventionally handsome, but he's kind, honest, and a wonderful person. I've made a vow to myself to never be swayed by appearances and to discern people's true nature. My name is Sophie. I've been a housewife for 3 years now, married. My husband Tim works for a top-tier company as a businessman, and we live on the 20th floor of a high-rise apartment. The night view from our living room is incredibly beautiful, but being raised in the countryside, I initially wanted in a lower-floor apartment when we first got married. However, I agreed to accommodate my husband's wish to live in a high-rise. We both belonged to the same tennis club in college. Tim, 2 years my senior, was a leader, whereas I joined somewhat casually and was a rather inconspicuous member. Back then, Tim had a girlfriend, so we weren't that close during college. But, a couple of years after I graduated and started working at a law firm, I ran into Tim by chance at a bar. Feeling nostalgic, we chatted about old times and exchanged contact information. Both of us were single at the time, so we gradually began to date. Tim was as sociable as ever with a wealth of topics, and I often found myself listening to his stories. Working at a top-tier company, Tim faced a lot of stress, so dating me seemed to be a source of encouragement for him. After dating for about 1.5 years, Tim proposed to me. I had just started my 3rd year at the law firm and acquired my paralegal certification, and I wanted to continue working even after marriage, but I earn enough for us to live comfortably. I want you, Sophie, to stay at home, he said, so I resigned from my job upon marrying him. I never disliked cooking or housekeeping, even when I lived alone, so I enjoyed my days as a housewife. With no financial worries and living in a high-rise, even my parents and friends envied me. So, I focused on making sure Tim could concentrate on his work, carefully planning meals with balanced nutrition and cleaning diligently every day. Then, one day, as Tim was enjoying his favorite hamburger steak at the dinner table, he cheerfully said, "We've been invited to dinner by the couple living on the top floor." Eh? That stunningly handsome and beautiful couple who looks like celebrities? Yeah, exactly. I sometimes see the husband at the gym downstairs. We're the same age, which surprised me. Our high-rise has a community gym on the 2nd floor. I'm not fond of machine workouts and only occasionally go for yoga, but Tim, who loves exercise, goes 2 or 3 times a week. Really? That intelligent-looking man with glasses? Yeah. He's an IT company CEO, apparently. Well, living on the top floor, he must be doing well. Then, should we book a fancy restaurant for the dinner? No, we've been invited to their place. Tim explained that he bumped into the couple at the apartment entrance today and got invited. Sophie, they said they'd like you to come too. Is that okay? I've only exchanged brief greetings with them. It's an invitation, so why not? Besides, I'm curious about the top floor. Tim, who can easily socialize with anyone, said. On the other hand, I, being shy, wasn't too keen on the idea. I wondered if it was just a polite gesture from them. But before I knew it, the plan became a reality, and we were visiting them this weekend. I brought some simple homemade dishes, but the couple had a professional chef cook for us. It was my first experience of such a luxury, so I felt overwhelmed. However, Wendy, the wife, was friendly and easy to talk to, and by the end of the meal, I felt as comfortable as with a friend. Excited, we talked about our experience. Even after returning from Wendy's place. I haven't had such a good chat in a long time, it was truly enjoyable. Becoming a housewife meant I didn't get to see my friends as much, so meeting Wendy was a delightful event for me. Maybe you could go for lunch with her sometimes? Wendy doesn't seem to work every day.
And having a chef at home, that's just on another level.
Wendy worked as a freelance designer, handling wallpaper and curtain designs, and seemed to have her own clientele, working at her own pace.
I often work from home, so let's have tea together sometime,
she suggested as we were leaving.
Yeah, she's as beautiful as a movie star, but so approachable and genuinely nice. I'd be happy to become friends with her. Yeah, she really is beautiful. Probably the most beautiful woman I've ever met.
Really? Saying that in front of me?
No, it's different. Sophie, you're cute, right? It's a different type.
You don't have to explain so desperately. I know myself well enough. I made a slightly pouting face, but seeing Tim's wry smile, I burst into laughter. Seeing me laugh, Tim joined in. It had been a while since we had such a lively atmosphere, joking around. Maybe it was all thanks to meeting the Wendy couple. But little did I know then, this encounter would lead to an incredible challenge. Since then, Tim and I haven't visited Wendy's place together, but Wendy and I became close enough to frequently meet for lunch or tea. One of my worries was that Tim and I were unable to have children. I was considering fertility treatment but couldn't bring myself to discuss it with Tim. I could openly share these feelings with Wendy, though.
Fertility treatment can be tough. Maybe it's okay to leave things to nature for a while?
Yeah, maybe. But somehow, I feel like Tim isn't that keen on having children.
I see. It's tough, isn't it, the feelings between a couple? In my case, it's the opposite. My husband wants kids, but I'm not so enthusiastic.
Really?
Yeah. I had a miscarriage before. After that experience, I thought maybe it's okay not to try to get pregnant again.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was insensitive of me.
No, don't worry about it. It's all in the past now.
Seeing Wendy's smiling response, I thought how strong she was.
You're right. I should just let nature take its course for a bit. I need to cherish the happiness I have now.
Wendy's expression seemed to cloud over for a moment as she looked at my smiling face.
Shall we head back? I have a design I need to think about by tomorrow.
I nodded to Wendy's always graceful demeanor, wondering if I had just imagined that brief change. But from that day on, every time we met, Wendy seemed to be getting thinner. One day, concerned, I asked her,
Wendy, is something troubling you? I might not be able to solve it, but I'm here to listen if you want.
Thank you. Actually, my husband and I are talking about divorce.
What?
I was speechless with shock. They had seemed so happy when Tim and I visited their home. What could have happened? Sophie, you're the only one I can talk to. What should I do? Wendy began to speak slowly, tears in her eyes. It seems my husband really wanted children. We've had arguments before, but I never imagined he was having an affair. According to Wendy, her husband was involved with a colleague at work. He had told her he would pay compensation for a divorce. Can you believe it? Before we were married, other men proposed to me too. He worked so hard every day to win me over, and now he wants to leave? What am I supposed to do now?
It's shocking. I shouldn't interfere in your marriage, but maybe you should talk to your husband again?
While feeling a bit uneasy about Wendy's situation, I chose my words carefully to avoid hurting her. After pouring her heart out to me, she whispered, "Things will surely work out." And then Wendy left. That evening at dinner, I opened up to Tim about Wendy and her husband's situation. How is Wendy's husband doing lately?
That's the thing, I haven't seen him recently. He hasn't been at the gym for about a week now.
Is that so? But he didn't seem like the type to cheat.
What are you talking about? It's always the serious, intellectual types that turn out to be the worst.
Initially, Tim had praised him for being an IT company CEO, but his sudden change of attitude made me feel uneasy. Within a month, Wendy came to tell me they were getting a divorce. Oh, what should I say?
It's okay. I've come to terms with it. For now, I'll be staying here. Alone? Yes. I arranged that as part of the conditions of the divorce. Kind of like a compensation.
Seeing Wendy so nonchalant about it scared me. Can people really change this much in such a short time? Still, knowing it wasn't my place to comment on their decision, I continued my friendship with Wendy as before. However, not long after this incident, cracks began to appear in my own marriage with Tim. Tim started coming home later than before and often went out on weekends. He claimed he was working overtime or attending business drinking parties, but sometimes he wouldn't contact me until after midnight, and I had to confront him about it.
Tim, I understand that work is busy, but isn't it too much lately?
What do you mean? What are you trying to say? Is it really just work?
What else would it be? Of course, it's work.
Then, at least let me know when you'll be late. I prepare meals and everything.
Huh. Sometimes, a sudden client dinner comes up. I have more responsibilities at work now. Being a housewife who plays at home, you wouldn't understand.
I was half astonished by Tim's selfish reasoning. Wasn't it Tim who wanted me to stay home in the first place? I thought I was making our daily life comfortable for him. Ignoring my opinion, Tim just walked away to his bedroom. We had started sleeping in separate bedrooms a few months ago, per Tim's request. I need proper sleep for work, he had said, but our intimate life had also disappeared, making me suspect he might be seeing someone else. Tired of having negative thoughts at home every day, I considered returning to work. So, I discussed this with Wendy.
It's not just me going through this, huh?
I haven't confirmed he's cheating, but I'm tired of suspecting him every day. That's why I'm thinking of going back to my old job.
That sounds good. I think you should work. Besides, I have a feeling Tim might have found someone else.
Wendy's words about someone else stuck in my mind. Maybe, but until I hear it from him, I've decided not to press the issue anymore. Wendy, thanks for listening. I'll try my best to get back into employment. Wendy nodded slowly, giving me her usual graceful smile. The next day, I went to the law firm where I used to work. There, I found out that Georgie, the lawyer I used to work for as a paralegal, had left the firm. Apparently, he had opened a detective agency a year ago. He was the one who taught me various job skills since my first year as a professional. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was thanks to him I became a paralegal. Wanting to discuss my future career, I decided to visit his detective agency. Georgie, long time no see.
Surprised you came all this way. It's been a while, hasn't it? Since your wedding, so about 3 years?
It's been that long already. You helped me so much.
No problem. So, what brings you here today? What happened?
As I discussed my intention to return to work, I ended up honestly sharing my marital troubles and suspicions that my husband might have a mistress.
Our office is a detective agency, quite different from your previous job. How about working here? Really? Yeah, we're actually short-handed and we're just thinking of hiring someone. We've been quite busy since we started, receiving investigation requests from the law firm I used to work at. Income is more than double what I earned as a lawyer. I can offer you a similar salary to before. Of course, this job isn't always pleasant. There are times when the pay doesn't even add up to $3 an hour.
Georgie, you're incredible. But why did you decide to quit being a lawyer?
Maybe I wanted to change my life,
Georgie said, looking distant as if recalling those days. Then, looking me straight in the eyes, he continued.
I think it's important for you to start a new life by investigating Tim and uncovering the truth.
Something inside me seemed to overflow at his words. Nodding. I'll pay the investigation fee, please do it. I quickly replied. The next day, I met Wendy at our usual cafe for lunch and told her about my new job. I didn't mention it was a detective agency, just said it was an investigation office opened by my former boss.
The pay might be less than $3 an hour for some tasks, but I feel like I can utilize my previous experience. I'll give it my best. That's great. I'm rooting for you. I'm thinking of going on a trip tomorrow for a change of scenery. You've been through a lot, Wendy. Enjoy your trip. Thank you.
Wendy responded with an even brighter smile than usual. That was the last day I saw my friend Wendy. A few days later, Georgie called me in to report the investigation results, and I was in disbelief. Tim's mistress was Wendy. Their affair had been going on for over a year. That meant they were already involved when our families had a dinner together. I can't believe it. Wendy was so kind, listening to all my troubles. Probably just a fling at first. But Wendy's husband must have noticed. Inviting you over might have been a warning to Tim. I don't know what Wendy told you, but her husband is a serious man, not the type to have affairs. Unbelievable. I was so shocked I couldn't say anything more. There's plenty of evidence. You could get a significant amount of compensation. Tim's on a business trip now, right? Yes. After managing to reply, something struck me, and I looked at Georgie. He nodded solemnly, placing a photograph in front of me. It showed Tim and Wendy entering a resort hotel together. They were on a trip. Eventually, Tim and I divorced. I didn't ask for compensation. Instead, I cited irreconcilable differences as the reason of the divorce. Leaving the house, I started working, renting a room in the building of the detective agency. Tim and Wendy remarried without any remorse. Are you really okay with this? Georgie asked me, but for me, it was all according to plan. However, I never thought I'd witness it with my own eyes. A year later, I unexpectedly ran into my ex-husband, Tim. It's been a while. How's work going? I heard it's like $3 an hour. Well, keep at it. He spoke in a mocking tone, and I replied, After a year, you still know nothing. What do you mean? Why don't you ask Wendy? Tim left with a look of dissatisfaction, but that night, he called me in a frenzy. Did you know about this? Know what? That Wendy is buried in debt. Wendy had always been a big spender. Though she claimed to be a designer, she didn't really make much. I knew. I knew you were involved with her for over a year while still married to me. Oh, and one more thing. While you were dating her, she miscarried a child from another boyfriend. That's a lie, right? You knew everything and still married her because you loved her, right? Good luck with that. Bye. I hung up and immediately blocked Tim's number. You finally put a period in that chapter of your life. You did well. Georgie, who had overheard the conversation, spoke to me gently. I couldn't hold back my tears. It was the first time I cried since the divorce. Georgie, without saying a word, just held me. After that, Georgie and I became the best partners, both in work and personal life. Apparently, he had been in love with me since we first met. Now, I love him very much too. Tim, on the other hand, ended up filing for bankruptcy because he couldn't pay off Wendy's huge debts. He couldn't stay at his company and now works for a delivery service. This isn't what I signed up for. He spends his days dealing with Wendy, who constantly complains. They betrayed people without a second thought, but will they ever realize the consequences of their actions?